Just enjoy.
All right, we're going to get started here. Welcome everyone back to the NNP Symposium, or welcome to Central States if you are here in person. As you all know by this point, we are sponsored by EPNIS, the Eric P. Newman Numismatic Education Society, and we're excited to be back at Central States for the second year with a hybrid event. So we have people watching online as well as here in person. This hour will be our final talk in the Focus on Franklin series for today. We've had 3 presentations in a row, all talking about Benjamin Franklin's contributions to numismatics. So we are joined by Khachatur Manykyan. Khachatur, I'm going to have you turn your camera and your mic back on, and we'll get started. 1 second. Keep forgetting my notes. All right, so Khachatur Manykyan is a research associate professor at the Nuclear Science Laboratory at the University of Notre Dame. He has a PhD in physical chemistry from Yerevan University in Armenia from 2006. And his research includes studying the structure, composition, and preparation methods of ancient artifacts, including paper money, which is what we're here to talk about today. If you caught our first presentation, this is the paper that Farley Grubb plugged at the end of it, not even realizing that we are going to have a presentation on it later today. So, Khachatur, let's make sure that your audio is working.
Can you hear me?
We're doing good. All righty. Then I will hop off and let you get started, and I'll be back at the end for the Q&A.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank for invitation. This is first time in this community for me to present our research. So its title says it's a multi-scale scientific analysis of Ben Franklin's innovations in American paper money. So I would like to point that we have been doing this about 6-7 years now. So finally, we've summarized a publication. So I'm going to present some of the data that we this research resulted. So okay. So but before that, I would like to have some introduction about Franklin. I'm sure that many of you know. But I would like to have some photos. I wanted to find some photos about Franklin, but you may imagine that you cannot find photos at that time. So I asked artificial intelligence, ChatGPT, to generate the photos that could describe Franklin's important life events that could connect also to money. So this is ChatGPT's interpretation of Franklin, newborn Franklin. He born in January 17, 1706 in Boston, in a very large family. His father wanted him to go to become a clergy, but unfortunately he had no money to support Franklin's education. And Franklin was only at school for 2 years. Ironically, after this short period of time learning, he self-taught in himself so many different things that eventually he became honorary professor, honorary degree holder from world's greatest universities at that time. But this is ChatGPT's interpretation of being Franklin at school. Of course, I'm not sure that Franklin wear this nice clothing. The family was quite poor, and so you can also see that AI still needs to improve about his AI's understandings of word map at that time. It's not entirely true. So this depicts the moment when Franklin started to work for his brother in a printing shop. So brother James was a pretty well-known printer already at that time in Boston, Massachusetts. So he started to work there, but and there was very interesting stories. So there was some problems between 2 brothers, but eventually this time was very critical for him to learn lots of stuff about printing, but also read a significant amount of books to learn about everything. Unfortunately, then he decided that at age of 17 he should move to from family, and he left to New York, but eventually he ended up being in Philadelphia. And this is the moment that he arrives to Philadelphia. I was 17-year-old, very ambitious young man, And you can see that ChatGPT still struggles. You can see back here in the background modern skyscrapers. You wouldn't see those naturally in this time. Also, you can see a colonial American flag here, which is not also true because there was no America at that time. It was colonial times. So now, important events from Franklin's life. So in 1727, he founded a junto. This was some sort of group for like-minded people to coming together for discussions and then to have some community and then to try to socialize, talking about science, about philosophy at that time. So very critical time was when Franklin acquired a printing house in 1728. So he had find a way of buying this house because he had no money, but he find a wealthy partner who supported him. But then that partner, for some reason, moved on, and then he became a sole owner of that printing house. And almost the same time, he started publishing Pennsylvania Gazette, which was a landmark gazette, and it has served also for him as an advertisement media at that time for all of his printing career. So in 1731, Franklin came up with the idea of establishing Philadelphia's library company. So this was a very novel idea at the time that people could subscribe and then get put together money and buy books who could be in the library, and everyone can get it and read and return it. So of course this was for common good, but my take is that Franklin had also interesting ideas about how he could develop a market for his products. He was printer, he printed books, so this library company could have been a very nice customer for his printing business. In 1743, he established the American Philosophical Society. This was this is oldest society in America, North America, and it still exists. And this was kind of place when natural philosophers will come discuss science and then philosophy. Then he also started to advocate very early on about having a college in Philadelphia. Eventually, he was successful, and they found College of Philadelphia, which eventually opened its doors in 1751, and eventually, I think 50 years later, become what we know now as the University of Pennsylvania. So what we can see in all of these, his public life and public projects, that Franklin had a extraordinary ability to pursue the public and engage the citizens in creation of practical solutions for common good. But I think for important himself also, he was creating a market for his business, and meanwhile, he was enriching himself. This was very interesting philosophy that he used, although it was very good for everybody, but he also benefited personally. So when I was starting this project, or even before this project, I always thought myself, why we see Franklin on $100 bill, current bill at the United States bill. So the first answer is that it's very obvious he was one of the most influential founders of the United States. But then there is always more, all of people in this community know better than me that he had significant influence on developing colonial and then eventually continental dollar. So that's the probably second reason that you see his portrait on these bills. So I'm sure this community knows about the money much better than me, but I would just highlight this kind of a very generic, very broader view of money development, you could see that if we categorize this, money started like very long time ago. So eventually it wasn't money, it was just barter. Then some, common things became commodity money, then representative money came along, and then at some point societies decided to have a standardized money, and the paper money started appearing I think in China in some way. Then England started in 1694, so develop banknotes. Then soon after that, American colonies picked the idea that, okay, maybe we should have a local paper money. I think Boston, Massachusetts colony was the first one to introduce this in America. So Franklin's lifetime and all of his works on printing, and not only printing, is related to more or less this time in 18th century. So of course, money constantly is evolving. So we are now using a lot plastic money, which is probably not as good as all others in terms of its aesthetics, and it's also how you make them, how you deal with them. But and then we have now a new form of money, which is cryptocurrency, which is very uncertain right now, but I'm sure this is the future of the money. So now going back to Franklin, so I would like to highlight again this ability, that why he started new things. So and this is our AI generated voice of Franklin. I hope that you can hear this.
And printed an anonymous pamphlet on it entitled "The Nature and Necessity of a Paper Currency." It was well received by the common people in general, but the rich men disliked it, for it increased and strengthened the clamor for more money, and they, happening to have no writers among them that were able to answer it, their opposition slackened, and the point was carried by a majority in the House. My friends there, who conceived I had been of some service, thought fit to reward me by employing me in printing the money, a very profitable job and a great help to me. This was another advantage gained by my being able to write.
So this summarizes his way of thinking at that time, because it was very early time. I think it was just after first emission of Pennsylvania paper money. So for some reason, people, especially wealthy population, didn't like paper money. And the Franklin was advocating that, okay, we need the money to support local economic development, but he also needed this contract from colonial government to print money. And he came up writing this anonymous pamphlet and distributing, and eventually general people, common people liked it. And the sentiments brought to the colonial government to issuing the second emission of Philadelphia money, Pennsylvania money. And he got one of the first very generous and lucrative contract printing this money. But over the time, Franklin became a very interesting person in colonial times. He created this network of printers to work for him, with him. And this, you can see list here of these printers in different colonies. They worked with Franklin. So Franklin owned this Pennsylvania Gazette. It was very nice advertisement media. And he was a postmaster, and then he was able to ship and receive goods very quickly and in a good price. He was buying and trading all of these printing supplies. You can think of his business model as nowadays Amazon business model, when like Jeff Bezos and then all these people do these types of activities. So it's kind of colonial time Amazon type model that he leveraged to become wealthy. And his business partners also used his techniques that he created for printing paper money. So for summarizing his activities in paper money, So he printed nearly 2.5 million money notes with total worth of about 900,000 pounds for different colonies. Then he retired. Before retiring, he brought a partner, David Hall, in 1749. And then Franklin wasn't working at that time as a printer, but he was partnered with Hall. But when he retired from business, he sold his share to William Sellers. And these Holland Sellers and eventually their, I think, sons became one of the main, money printers in the entire colonial America and later on. So Franklin's network, all these other printers also printed money for different colonies. But very famously, as we hear today, this morning's talk, Franklin was also a member of a committee that oversees printing of developing of continental dollars. And when this committee had established, they decided to have this currency, money. Then they commissioned Thomas Wilcox to print this money, make a paper for this money. And Hall and Sellers printed the money themselves. And this was kind of Franklin's old business partners and kind of friends and people he worked with. So, and all these techniques that we'll learn a little bit later today then Franklin developed, so have been used for printing continental money. So what we did in this work, we have at Notre Dame in our Rare Books and Special Collections Library, which is part of Hasbrook Library. So we have a very good collection of paper money, more than 600 notes of this colonial American paper money, about 100 of which is continental money, and the rest are colonial money. So we analyzed them, and why we did this. So the main, it was interesting and fun. The second, probably even more interesting thing, is to educate students, and they then reveal hidden historic patterns of money printing, and also also importantly, those are really valuable artifacts. So we find the ways to conserve and preserve them in museum settings. So main research has been done in this laboratory, which is Nuclear Science Laboratory at Department of Physics and Astronomy at the University of Notre Dame. We are NSF-funded laboratory, National Science Foundation funded laboratory, and it revolves around particle accelerators, very different, very large instrumentations that we usually use for studying nuclear reactions and some other purposes. But in this specific case, we use some of this stuff. And also we used another dozen of techniques listed here. Particle-induced X-ray emission, which is accelerator-based technique, XRF, all these, spectroscopic techniques and the images you could see them have been used to analyze this paper currency. So, and most of the work is done by some of our great undergraduate students. There are physicists, chemical engineers, chemists, art conservators. So I should note that we have a program, a small educational program where students come and then learn these techniques and use them. Some of our students were heavily involved in this money project, but we are not analyzing only money. We are analyzing coins, silver coins from Roman times, colonial American times, Spanish coins. We also, you see here, we analyze paintings which are stored in Notre Dame Museum. So this is a pretty good program where students learn and then they use these techniques to analyze the objects they like. So now getting to Franklin again. So when he started printing colonial paper money, specifically Pennsylvania money, so he noticed that there was some counterfeiting activity and people copied or altered these money, paper money. And it was really easy to think you could alter the bill value, just somehow increasing the adding some zeros or changing the denomination. So then he thought to start developing some techniques to combat against this forgery activities. So this is very well known. It's not related to our findings. So in early on in his career, he established this nature printing technique. So putting these natural objects into paper wasn't new. It was invented by Leonardo da Vinci, but he somehow managed to find a way of print these things. And you could see that he printed all these different leaves on the backside of paper money. The rationale here was that having this very intricate, natural, detailed structure on the back of the paper, so would make it difficult people to duplicate it. But I guess it wasn't very safe way of combating. So I think people started even to do these types of things. And many of you know that he deliberately misspelled some of the text inside the paper or spelled differently. This was another way of kind of distinguishing that, for example, bill with certain denomination will be written only in this way. So if somebody forges it, so it would be obvious. But then probably this wasn't also a very good strategy. Later on, he came with some other ideas that maybe incorporating some very tiny fibers inside the paper itself could help to distinguish the bills. You could see this idea develop later on. Here, this is this very large blue-colored thread inside the paper, or these microfibers. Those are specifically incorporated stuff. And here on the left-hand side, you can see one of them. I think our oldest bills at Notre Dame, it's a 1739 issue. We can see this nature printed pattern here. And this is Franklin's name as a printer. So as I mentioned here, so you have these fibers and threads. So we wanted to know what those are. So we took many of them and we analyzed with a technique called X-ray fluorescence spectroscopy and Raman spectroscopy. And turned out that these fibers and microfibers and these threads, this is one of the largest ones sitting here. So when we imaged them with these techniques, we found that they contain calcium, potassium, sulfur, and Raman spectroscopy showed that it contains indigo. So this is most likely silk fibers colored with indigo. Indigo at that time primarily was extracted in China. Most likely those came from China. And these elements that you see here, potassium, calcium, and sulfur, there are part of compounds like fly ashes or some natural potash-bearing compounds that people use to extract these indigo from plants by using these inorganic compounds. So we confirmed that those are indigo-colored silk threads. So another interesting thing that you can see over the time, early on bills were like a black and white, grayscale, let's say black ink. But over the time, he and then later on his also partners developed this very nice, intricate way of printing with detailed structures, and they eventually become a really nice colored money in many cases. This is example of Isaac Collins bill printed in already during the revolutionary time. So one interesting finding that we found, so black ink, printing ink that Franklin used has a really unique composition. So it's based on Raman spectroscopy, these two peaks that you see here. We find out this is a natural graphite. So graphite. So graphite is a form of carbon. It's a more ordered crystalline carbon. And so usually people use carbon to print on money at that time. That carbon lamp black was used, and Franklin himself extensively used that. But if you run this spectroscopy with the carbon lamp black, you will see different pattern. So, and most likely he used the natural graphite, because we also find some impurities in graphite, which is characteristics of natural appearing graphite, to print this money. We don't see any of these types of pigment, this type of printing ink colorant in any other of his printing jobs, including Gazette. So this was unique, that and somehow he managed to print with this graphite thing. Then we analyze and compare the other colonies, other printers at that time, to see what else he used uniquely. So you can see here that, for example, in this bill, upper left-hand side, so we have no calcium and phosphorus. And if you look, this one is upper right-hand side. It's also from his one of his partners, Parker, James Parker in New Jersey. So you don't see much of the calcium and phosphorus, because this printing ink is graphite. But if you look at the Paul Revere's workshop, you see a calcium and phosphorus associated with the printing ink. The same you can see on a fake bill printed, which ascribed to James Parker. So most of the colonial printers, they use this bone black, which was made by heating a bone, animal bones, because bones contain calcium and phosphorus as a calcium phosphide, but they also contain large amount of organic materials which pyrolyze and carbonize during heating. So this bone black is black colored ink, but since you have a calcium and phosphorus, you can easily see under this X-ray imaging. So then we can tell precisely that most of the printers used bone black, but Franklin used only this graphitic carbon. This is distinction from all other printers. So over the time, as we mentioned, so he used this nice red pigment, which contains sulfur, it contains mercury, and by Raman spectroscopy, we identified this as a vermilion, very famous ancient pigment, and also toxic pigment to print these colors, red colors. So this was a part of his printing also strategy, to use the vermilion. So over the time, you see that it becomes, this is one of his partners, interesting design with lots of red, and also a very interesting blue pigment here, which has lots of iron. And then Raman spectroscopy showed us that this is a so-called iron hexacyanoferrite, or Prussian blue. So this pigment was invented in Europe in 1706, and pretty quick it appeared also in American colonies, and the printer started use this. So, but most intriguing thing that I found is the existence of these crystals inside the paper. So now there is no direct evidence that Franklin worked on making papers by himself, but there are lots of historic literature which speculate that Franklin was involved with some printer, Anthony Newhouse, to develop a specific paper specifically used for printing money. So, and the historians think that he kept a specific separate secret ledger to record all of his dealings with this paper maker, between years of 1740 to 1743. This ledger never found. It's we don't know where it is or it's survived. But interestingly, in his very well-known papers, in his very well-known financial books, so you can find lots of entries after this time buying a paper money from Newhouse. This is fact, so everybody can go look that. So historians speculate that, oh, Franklin was involved in developing this specific paper for printing money, and that's why he kept the separate ledger. But unfortunately, this is not survived to confirm this hypothesis. So then we analyzed the paper with from different years. For example, here is this one of the first emissions in Philadelphia, 1739, and then on so on. So you could see that these peaks, this spectra, the A1 is the early bill. So it has this broad 3 peaks. Those are cellulose, and it's supposed to be like this because paper is mostly a cellulose made from, at that time, from rocks. But then if you look over the time, in addition to those peaks, you see this much bigger, much intense peaks, narrow peaks. And those are coming from these crystals, these shiny crystals, which appear either on the bills or inside the paper. So we believe that those came from these bills, and then analyzing these types of patterns, it gives us, it's a muscovite. So muscovite is a mineral. The common muscovite is a mica crystal. Many of you may be familiar with this. It's very nice material. So in order to confirm more than it's really muscovite, so we did some sort of very interesting analysis, and we took a very small crystal from the bill. Museum allowed us to do it, and inserted in a microscope, which is electron microscope. So this is a video. It's not the this is not the specifically this particle, but what we could do here, it's generally, it's another sample, but to give you a perspective, so we can take that small piece and then magnify. Now this bar is 10 micrometer here. So this is about 10 times smaller than human hair. So we can make a very small, cross section. We can remove some areas and then make this wall. And eventually this is done under microscope. This process takes 4 hours to do it, but this is a much faster version of it. So then the idea is to take this very small piece out of that larger sample and then to analyze with different devices. So you could see we are now cutting with ion beam to isolate this very tiny area. Again, this is a you cannot see by eye this feature. It's less than more than 10 times smaller than human hair. So then after doing this type of preparation, we take out this small section from main sample. And after that, we weld it to another sample holder. Then welding this sample holder followed by more polishing the sample. So it's very, very tiny sample now. And then we are polishing, and eventually we are getting this very nice sample, which is already electron transparent. So this is all done in this instrument, and you can see the final results of this type of sample when then we use it to image more. So unfortunately, it turns out that these samples were very, very difficult to image, and we could destroy them by electron beams. You could see here, this all areas is destroyed. The rest of these layers are original material, but we cannot see much. But then at Notre Dame, we had an instrument, which is pretty expensive instrument. $6 million machine. So you could put in this new instrument this sample and then analyze very quickly, and then you could eventually get resolve all of these images. Then you can eventually you will damage it again. You could see damage the area, but early stages you can preserve it. So this allowed us to analyze in a very great detail. So I'm not going to details here because those are, for example, here when we magnify, those are single atoms, those are potassium atoms, and those are oxygen, silicon, aluminum, hydrogen. All of those atoms are identified individually. So it shows that we have all of these elements which supposed to be in mica crystals. And this layer structure is also characteristics of mica crystals. We did lots of also analysis. I'm not going into details here. So we did valence state analysis. And then we proved that there is also some iron inside muscovite, small amount of iron. We confirmed that it's muscovite, it's a mica crystal. Then we turned it to more easy technique to analyze ratio of silicon and aluminum in these materials and plot this ratio over the years where we have this type of money to analyze in which we have these crystals. So important thing is that when you see this ratio in between the silicon and aluminum is more or less the same in same time period in the same colonies. So for example, here we have this red data point and blue. Those are from different colonies, but they have the same ratio. And the same we can tell about iron to potassium ratio. So it's more or less the same in the same time period. For example, if iron content is increasing, it's all increasing in all bills, in all crystals. This points out that these crystals are coming from same geological origin. So Pennsylvania is close to Appalachian Mountains. Philadelphia is close to Appalachian Mountains. And then these paper makers were outside of Philly at that time. And even though Chester County, for example, so if you go there still now, you can find this muscovite crystal, mica crystals. So some reason Newhouse and then Franklin incorporated these crystals inside the money and money paper. And we would like to know why they did this. So the first idea came to our mind is most likely they incorporated these crystals to make it mechanically more robust and durable. And you could see that paper money printed from Franklin and later on with Hall and Sellers, it has a different like mechanical properties, even if you know, so it's a little bit more sturdy, more durable, I believe. But that's also confirms that somehow confirms our hypothesis that in these peels you don't see kaolinite. Kaolinite is very good mineral which has been used for a long time in paper, and all of the colonial printers paper except Franklin, most of them, they have this kaolinite. So kaolinite used also to make a paper money more robust and also make it more whiter. So Franklin somehow decided not to use it, or Newhouse, and they incorporated these crystals inside the paper. But the second, so I think soon after they realized that, okay, maybe these crystals could be leveraged also for finding counterfeit bills. So we image them, different bills from different times. So this is a Pennsylvania bill printed in this year. You could see that it's uniform bill, nothing important. So this is potassium distribution. Potassium is a part of this mica crystal. And over the time, you can see these crystals are increasing. These blue dots are these crystals inside the bill. And you could see some of them become a millimeter size. And over time, all of these crystals become larger and larger, and they appear on the surface. So this tells us, so we assume that besides the making pills more robust, because these mica crystals were shining and glimmering, so whenever you tilt the pill, you see them nicely, they glimmer. So this was leveraged as an additional measure for combating making these pills even more safer. So this hypothesis somehow confirmed when we looked at fake bills and then real bills. So this is a bill printed by James Parker. No, this one, the lower one. This is a bill printed by James Parker, and you could see lots of these muscovite crystals inside them. And but the same time period fake bill does not have these features, these crystals, this more localized iron concentrations. So this also gives us idea that they came up with this later on to make the bill's integrity more enhanced. So everything was changed during the Revolutionary War. So it turns out, I think that was mentioned in this morning's talk by Professor Grubb, in New York, British dumped lots of counterfeit money. It was documented historically, so you can find them pretty often in that times newspapers. So there is this very well-known example when some captain reports to a gazette that they were seizing a ship, and they found huge amount of these papers with glass on it. They referred glass, these mica things. And eventually this introducing these fake bills was one of the reasons of, I believe, and many historians also believe, that one of the reasons of depreciating value, because this introduction of this huge amount of counterfeit bills undermine the confidence of general public to American paper money. It's ironic because by this time the quality and then by this time the design of this bill was really great. So it was nicely printed, very well designed with great materials. But eventually all of us know that it became eventually very worthless thing, and then people didn't use it. So this strategy of faking money by a government was established in this time during the American Revolution. But this wasn't, later on it's used by French, the same tactics, by British in France, eventually Austrian and Russian money faked by France too, and even British money faked by Germans during the World War. So this was a first event, and then later on many tactics used, many government used to use this type of counterfeiting of money as a warfare tactic. So we summarize all of our findings in a scientific journal. This called Proceedings of National Academy of Sciences. It's a pretty well-known journal. It's an interdisciplinary journal. People publish here from all over the disciplines: physics, chemistry, biologists, social sciences, history. So we documented and published it. And this research was mostly supported by University of Notre Dame, and also the lab where we done these experiments or research is supported by National Science Foundation. So it generated very warm and very large attention from media. More than 100 well-known journals, newspapers, portals, published articles, news, and interviews. It's highlighted in a very highly ranked scientific journals. So not only here in US, but internationally. So German broadcasters in India, in Brazil, in France, they all wrote articles about this research. So yeah, I would like to mention that this was done with the help of undergraduate students. So And then they were also part of this paper, co-authored the paper, these three people, physicist and art historian. So they learned these techniques, used that, and then helped us to understand all these interesting historic things and the material science aspects of paper money. So I think I'm done with this, and thank you very much for your attention. And this is a video from University of Notre Dame, Golden Dome. So visit us. So we have a great campus. So we would be happy to host you here. Thank you.
All right, then we're going to open it up for questions. And then also for anyone watching, if you wanted to access the paper later, the link from that last slide we'll put in the description of the video for this talk when it's released later online. So if anyone wants to go out and find that later, you'll be able to find it there. So I know we already had one question online, so we'll take care of that one and then open it up to the room.
All right, so first question, if crystals were used as an anti-counterfeiting technique, how were they identified in everyday use?
I cannot hear for some reason. Can you repeat it?
Oh, yeah. If crystals were used as an anti-counterfeiting technique, how were they identified in everyday use?
Oh, you can see them, many of them, by naked eye. So some of these, for example, we go back here. So this is inside a bill. We cannot see, or maybe we can look on this one. You can still see some of writing here. So this is 10 millimeter size, this scale bar or here. And the specific particle is about 5 millimeter, is seen by eye. And then if you just look at it, you will see these things. You immediately notice them. Some of them inside paper, some of them very nicely sitting on the surface of the paper, on the paper. They are attached pretty well. The uniqueness of this crystal, because you see that it's here, how it looks like, because of its atomic structure. Let's go back here. So we have these layered structures, or in this case, you can see here, you can kind of peel it off indefinitely. And the small flakes could attach on the surface. This was ingenious way of incorporating. If it's our assumption that they came up with this idea to make bills more safer. It looks like everything going to that direction. I cannot say it 100%, but it's assumption, I think. But you could see that all the time in the many bills we analyzed, and you can see all of them if you look closer. So I think it was a way of identifying them.
All right, do we have any questions from in the room? Yes?
I have one. Maybe not really a question, but talking about the mica fiber or chips in the money and seeing it with the naked eye. I noticed as a numismatist, and you can see them. If you could see some of the notes on the show floor today, if you move them a little, you could see the reflectiveness of them. And then in my mind, I just saw, I think it was a video on colonial paper money making, because I thought, well, how do those chips would fall out of the paper, that they're laying on the sort of the surface of the paper. And then I came to find that watching a colonial paper making, when the paper was laid and pressed and flattened, but it was sort of a gelatin or a gesso, like an artist would do on a canvas, was put on it, the paper, so to allow the ink not to absorb as quickly as it should, but to lay and dry on top of that paper. And if the doctor would want to comment on that, but I come to remember that. So in case so
I can comment on this. We don't know how they really made at that time, but what we can see from analysis very early on. So we have bills. Unfortunately, we don't have all of the time that we would like to have. the first bills that we see, Micah, it's starting from 1755, but we don't have in between to these years. So between 1739 and 1755. So I think originally idea wasn't that they just incorporated this much smaller crystals inside the paper. They just mixed with the slurry, and that gave a little bit of robustness of the paper itself. That's my speculation, my hypothesis. But then later on, they realized that, okay, some of this stuff appearing on the surface accidentally, and they glimmer. So most likely later on, they come up with something else, because you could see that later bills, like even starting from 59 here, 61, 70s. So they're conveniently sitting in these chips on the surface. And we deliberately tried to extract some of them. It would be hard to take it out. Eventually you can do it, but it's not like it's, you can easily take it off. Sometimes some of the small pieces can be fall off, without any efforts, but these large ones, they're somehow nicely sitting on this paper. And it was interesting to understand how they managed to do this, because it seems like you still have some inside the paper, but some of them, these larger ones, are kind of stick on the paper surface.
All right, do we have anything else online?
It's more of a comment than a question, but a listener says, I was very much enjoyed the scientific analysis, but forget the AI as its accuracy remains questionable.
Did that one come through?
Barely. I couldn't hear.
It was a comment from a listener online saying that they enjoyed the scientific analysis, but forget the AI as the accuracy is questionable.
Okay. Yeah, AI is developing things, so it's I could have changed a lot and then get the probably right background, but I wanted also to show that's also developing as paper money was developed, like in 18th century, from very simple to very sophisticated. I believe it's a work in progress, but I like the comment. Thank you.
Okay, do we have anything else?
Yeah, next question. This is interesting. Were muscovite crystals used in currency from other countries during the same period?
So were muscovite crystals used in currencies from other countries during the same period?
Unfortunately, I don't know the answer of the question. So that's really great question. So that time, I think most of, you can correct me if I'm wrong. So I'm not numismat, I'm not money expert. So there was probably European, mostly England, who printed at that time paper money. It should be natural to look there. I don't know the answer, but I would speculate that English and then UK eventually during the war, they knew about this. That's why they brought this huge amount already ready-made paper into New York, and then they faked these bills and then distributed it. It's historic fact. So I would assume that technology, at least known and used in England to bring it to during the war, but whether they use it in their local currencies, that's I don't know. I would also love to know.
Okay, anything else?
One more question. It said Franklin bought ink early in his printing office, early in his career, but became displeased with the quality and then finally bought an ink making company to produce consistent ink quality. So the question is, if you compared Franklin's earliest notes against his later work, to see if there's any difference there.
Yes, so we had, unfortunately, the earliest notes are not as survived as the later ones. We had analyzed, let me remember, so I have analyzed 8 bills from Pennsylvania that he's printed. Then he's alone. Then Franklin and Hall printed a lot, so we have those. We analyzed. Those are years between 55 to 64, 1755, 64. It's been probably 25 of them. Then we analyzed very early Delaware bills that he printed, about 10 of them. So interestingly, so the inks were always this graphite carbon-based ink. So it even was very, very, very visible on, I would just go back here. So you could see this bill. This is 1734 Delaware bill, and it contains this graphitic ink inside. And it's also confirmed that this black ink contains silicon. That's also indication of use of natural graphite. Natural graphite is not pure. So if you produce nowadays in chemical factory, so you would exclude silicon, but that in natural world, you have even more. We have even more other impurities. We saw those. But it was pretty consistent even after that, like 1750s. You see same sort of pigment. Of course, I've noticed that. So these inks became much more colorful. So they incorporated vermilion later on. You can see here, this is still was active as a printer. So 1760s vermilion. And then eventually when he retired, after he is also this other blue stuff came along. There's some also more obscure pigments, but there is interesting development of incorporating different inks.
All right, anything else?
Just another comment says the British had a printing plant aboard a ship in New York Harbor, which is pretty remarkable. All the counterfeit currency wasn't produced in UK. They actually did it just a little bit offshore.
Can you repeat that?
Yes, a comment from a listener saying that the British actually had a printing plant in a ship off where was it?
New York Harbor.
In the New York Harbor. So some of the counterfeiting was happening not overseas, but in the seas.
Oh, okay. That's great to know.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm not historian. I'm scientist.
Okay, is that it? All righty, great. Then thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
That will wrap us up for this one. Starting at 1:30 Central, whatever your time zone is, we'll be joined by Scott Hansen, who's going to be the first of our Iowa State Showcase grouping, talking about some early Iowa items. Khachatur is gone. So we hope you'll join us for that. This will conclude our Focus on Franklin series. And as always, all of the recordings from the symposium will be online about 2 to 3 weeks from now. So you're welcome to watch any of the presentations afterwards there. So if you're not already signed up and you'd like an email when those are up, you're welcome to sign up for our email list on our website. Otherwise, keep an eye on our social media and we'll share there as well when the recordings are available. So that's it for this one. Hope to see you all back here in about 30 minutes.